Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. My name is Alicia Rivera. I'm 29 years old, and before the outbreak, I was working as a licensed vocational nurse in Fort Worth, Texas. I'd been volunteering in my spare time for the Red Cross and the local Medical Reserve Corps. Nothing heroic, just blood drives, weather shelter support, and, once, helping staff a mobile clinic during wildfire evacuations outside Austin. So, when the state called for emergency volunteers in late September, I signed up without hesitation. I didn't even read the waiver. I just clicked accept and waited for instructions. They flew us out on short notice, civilian transport chartered from American Eagle. We were told we'd be supporting quarantine operations at 8-Tent Stadium in Arlington, normally home to the Dallas Cowboys. The National Guard had already converted it into a temporary intake center for those possibly exposed to the outbreak. At the time, it wasn't clear what we were dealing with. They kept calling it an aggressive hemorrhagic virus. The media was quiet or confused or maybe muzzled. By the time I arrived, flights out of state had been grounded for 3 days. I figured I'd be there a week. 2 tops. I never left. We got off the bus under the glowing shadow of the giant retractable dome, escorted through a side tunnel labeled Media Access. It felt surreal. There were still banners hanging for a canceled preseason game, and the turf inside was dotted with folding cots, plastic sheeting, IV poles, and field hospital gear. There were tents sectioned off by color-coded tarps. Blue for non-infected, orange for observation, red for critical. The triage system was simple. If they walked in talking and breathing, they went to blue. If they had a fever or were confused, orange. If they were bleeding from the mouth or had to be restrained, red. By the second day, they stopped asking about symptoms. They just waved people in and sorted them by behavior. The Texas National Guard ran security, mostly young soldiers, green and gray uniforms, and rifles they never slung out of sight. The command post was set up in the Cowboys' locker room. One of the sergeants, Staff Sergeant Clay Whitmore, gave us a welcome briefing that amounted to this. Don't argue with guards. Don't touch patients without gloves and masks. Don't wander into restricted areas. And if you hear 3 short blasts on the stadium speakers, drop everything and report to the central concourse. 3 blasts means lockdown, he said. You do not want to be out of position during lockdown. I didn't sleep much that first night. I was assigned to Orange Sector D in what used to be the East End Zone Club. Patients were stacked 10 to a row on portable stretchers, most of them coughing, vomiting, or just moaning. We had a few actual doctors, but mostly it was us volunteers, EMTs, med students, retired nurses. The rest were military medics, overstretched and underslept. I bunked in one of the suites with a couple other volunteers, Travis Mendez, a paramedic from El Paso, and Claire Wu, a second-year nursing student from Houston. We kept our gear packed by the door. By day 4, everything began to unravel. The first sign was the gates. There were 8 main access tunnels into the stadium, and each one had a checkpoint staffed by guardsmen in full PPE. They checked IDs, took temperatures, sometimes even blood samples. But that morning, I was walking a patient, a little boy, maybe 6, to the blue tent when I noticed the checkpoint near Tunnel 4 was unmanned. The gates were wide open. People were just walking in. I asked one of the guards near the concourse, but he didn't look up from his radio. I don't got answers, he muttered. They told us to pull back. Pull back to where? By midday, Blue Sector was overflowing. Families were crammed under banners for Bud Light and Pepsi, holding onto shopping bags, crying children, and plastic-wrapped sandwiches. Someone said another convoy was arriving from Waco. Someone else said Houston General had been overrun. I stopped trying to confirm anything. Every hour brought more infected and fewer staff. Travis looked grim when I met him on break. "They're not tracking who's coming in anymore," he said. "You noticed that?" I had. "You think they gave up?" "I think they're scared," he said, eyes scanning the ceiling like it might cave in. "There was a guy in red this morning. Ripped out his IV and bit an MP. They say the MP coded within minutes. It's not a virus anymore, Alicia. It's something else." I didn't want to believe that. I still thought we could manage it. Isolate the worst cases, ventilate the tents, keep order, treat who we could. Then came the screams from Sector Red. They burst out from beneath the bleachers near Gate 3, a crowd of maybe 10 patients. Only they weren't patients anymore. Their skin was gray and slick with sweat, eyes wide, mouths clenching. I heard the unmistakable sound of someone getting tackled. A wet thud, then another scream. I saw a medic run across the concourse and then get dragged down by 3 of them. They moved fast, unnaturally fast. No limping or staggering like the movies. These ones sprinted. Guards started shouting, raising weapons. I expected gunfire, but none came. They were trying to push people back with shields and batons. I grabbed a crash cart and used it to block the hallway near Sector D. Claire ran with me. Behind us, one of the red patients, an older man in a shredded gown, lunged over a folding chair and sank his teeth into someone's throat. Claire gagged. "Is he biting her?" I couldn't answer. I was too busy pulling her into a supply closet. We stayed there, pressed against the shelves of gauze and bandages, as the chaos echoed through the concrete tunnels. We heard someone calling for help, then more screams, then the first of the 3 siren blasts. 1, 2, 3, lockdown. The overhead lights dimmed. Emergency strobes began flashing at every tunnel entrance. Heavy gate doors slid down over every entrance like theater curtains, cutting us off from the outside. A mechanical voice on the PA repeated the message. "Facility is in lockdown, remain calm, await further instruction." But there was no further instruction. No all clear, no guards came to check on us. When we finally stepped out again, 20 minutes later, the concourse looked like a war zone. Blood smeared across vending carts and medical gurneys. Shoes and stretchers abandoned mid-run. No sign of the infected, but also no sign of command. I radioed the medical tent. No response. I tried the guard post channel. Silence. Claire looked pale. She clutched her bag like a life vest. Did they just leave us? I didn't answer. We gathered survivors. That became our mission over the next 6 hours. We found Travis holed up behind the concessions near section 218, tending to a patient with a cracked jaw and a mangled forearm. He'd wrapped the wounds with duct tape and gloves, muttering that it was just temporary. We searched locker rooms and utility closets, storage spaces under the stands, and eventually found a handful of others. Another volunteer named Imani Wells, 2 guardsmen with empty rifles, and a terrified maintenance worker named Bobby Clay, who claimed he knew a way into the service tunnels. "This whole place," Bobby said, sweating through his polo, "is built on storm drains and mechanical access. I seen the schematics. You can get from one side of the field to the other without ever being seen." We were huddled in a former team meeting room under the northeast corner of the stadium. The walls were covered with whiteboards still showing route trees and defense diagrams, as if the Cowboys had just walked out of a strategy session and left their season behind. Claire had found a packet of crackers and 2 small water bottles in one of the gym bags under the desk, and she was portioning them quietly while we all stared at Bobby like he was holding the keys to the city. because in a way, he was. According to him, the stadium had miles of underground access tunnels, mechanical corridors, stormwater drains, electrical vaults, and even utility crawlspaces originally built during the stadium's construction in 2009. Some were just maintenance passageways, but others connected to loading docks, HVAC service points, and backup generator rooms. Bobby had worked stadium maintenance for almost 4 years and had helped service everything from the scoreboard power inverters to the underfield cooling pipes. He said he knew the building better than the guards did. "There's a mechanical room beneath the west tunnel," he said, sketching quickly on the back of an old playbook. "You can get there from behind section 112. From there, you follow the primary HVAC spine west, and it'll put you real close to the freight lift and, if it ain't been jammed, one of the emergency access panels near the southwest pylon." "You're saying that could get us outside?" Travis asked. Bobby hesitated. "Could. Don't mean will. Some of those panels got sealed after September 11th. Others just rusted shut, but if there's any way out, that's where I'd look." It wasn't a plan, not really, but it was more than we'd had 5 minutes ago. We split into 2 groups, one to scout the route Bobby described and one to stay behind and reinforce our current shelter. We weren't naive. We knew the infected were still inside, moving, hunting. The hallways were quiet for now, but we'd all seen what happened when the virus took hold. Fast transitions, no warning. We couldn't risk moving everyone until we were sure the path was clear. Travis, Amani, and one of the younger guards, Private Ellison, went with Bobby. They took 2 flashlights, a fire axe from the emergency wall cabinet, and a red-topped medical bag that I'd packed myself. It contained trauma shears, bandages, lidocaine, 2 tourniquets, and a small oxygen canister. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. Claire and I stayed back with the rest, 11 people in total, including a wounded guard named Jenner, who was still unconscious after being dragged out of Sector Red. We had no IV fluids left, and his breathing was shallow. I kept rechecking his pulse like something would change. Hours passed. The lights flickered twice, then held steady. We heard noises echoing from somewhere near the upper concourse, metal clanging, like chairs being knocked over. Then silence. No screams. No voices. That, more than anything, made my skin crawl. Eventually, the radio cracked. Static first, then Bobby's voice. "We're in the West Mechanical Access Tunnel. It's tight, but it runs clear. Lift's out of power, but we found the stairwell." He sounded strained, maybe out of breath. "Can you open the panel?" I asked. A pause, then a sigh. "Negative. Outer door's locked with a manual override. Needs a key cylinder. Military issued, far as I can tell. Guess who didn't leave us one?" The room went quiet. Claire leaned her head back against the wall, lips pressed into a line. "But," Bobby added, "we found a break room with a full snack rack and a water cooler. Nobody's been down here since March, looks like. We'll keep looking for a backup exit. Might be a duct access. Anything's better than the concourse." "Copy that. Be careful," I said. We lost contact 5 minutes later. The second outbreak came just after dusk. I'd been wrapping Jenner's arm when I heard the footsteps. Not a shuffle, not the dragging limp we'd all imagined zombies would have. These were fast, uneven, rapid. Then came the smell, like rot and old meat left in the sun. Claire turned toward the door just as it slammed open and a figure lunged through, skin gray, face half torn, shirt still marked volunteer. Her name had been Maya. She'd been with us during orientation. Now she was sprinting on all fours. I didn't think. I grabbed the crash cart and rammed it into her midsection, slamming her back into the hallway. The others screamed. Claire grabbed the defibrillator and swung it like a bat. Another infected stumbled in behind Maya, shirtless, mouth covered in dried blood. One of the patients we'd lost earlier. He dove at Jenner on the stretcher, and Imani, who'd made it back from the scout team just moments earlier, fired a flare gun point blank into his chest. The round hit him in the sternum, cracked bone, and sent him staggering back, engulfed in chemical fire. It didn't kill him. He thrashed, shrieked, arms flailing while the flames tore through his clothes. We rushed to barricade the door. The only thing that finally stopped the thing was a fire extinguisher to the skull, swung with all of Travis's strength. The fire didn't save us. The noise didn't save us. What saved us, if you can call it that, was what we saw when we dragged the burning body back into the hallway to clear it from the exit path. The infection was spreading inside the stadium, not just through bites. Imani pointed at the infected's arm. There was no bite, no wound, no injection site. But the veins beneath the skin were blackened, burned in patterns, like something corrosive had been running through them. "This isn't just contact," she said, breathing hard. "It's systemic, maybe airborne, maybe waterborne, maybe both." That was when Claire dropped the bottle of purified water we'd been sharing. We didn't know what to trust anymore. That night, we moved everyone we could down to the mechanical access tunnel Bobby had cleared earlier. Jenner was fading fast. Claire and I carried him on a makeshift stretcher made from folding chairs and zip ties. The stairwell to the freight dock smelled of rust and hydraulic fluid. The power was out, completely. No backup lights, no fans, no elevators humming in standby, just the constant, distant hum of wind moving through the ventilation shafts. We took shelter in the break room Bobby had found. It looked like a time capsule. Newspapers from April, stale muffins still in plastic, and a flat-screen TV that no longer had a signal. On the table sat a clipboard with a printed floor plan of the lower levels. It was water-damaged and stained, but readable. The schematics showed something we hadn't known existed. An underground loading tunnel leading toward Globe Life Field next door. The baseball stadium. If it hadn't collapsed or been sealed, it could lead us into the open air. "We follow this," Travis said, pointing with his flashlight. "We might make past the cordon." Imani looked doubtful. "And then what?" "The roads are gone. Phones are dead, no aircraft, no help. No infected out there," he said. That was the only argument that mattered. We left at dawn. Jenner died sometime in the night. We didn't hear him go. Claire found him cold and stiff just before we started moving again. We didn't burn the body. We didn't have the fuel. Instead, Bobby and the 2 guardsmen wrapped him in a tarp and left him in the maintenance corridor, marked with a yellow caution sign. It took 3 hours to reach the tunnel. The gate to the utility corridor was half crushed by what looked like a cave-in from a vehicle above. Maybe a tank, maybe a truck, we couldn't tell. But the side access was still passable if we crawled. One at a time, gear first, people second. The tunnel was cramped, metal-lined, lit only by the flickering beam of 2 flashlights. Rats scattered in front of us. The air was damp and sour, heavy with mildew and something else. Something chemical, not fuel, not rot. Something more sterile, like ammonia cut with copper. It clung to the back of the throat. Claire muttered that it smelled like an old morgue. The passage stretched for maybe 100 feet before sloping slightly upward toward a welded service ladder. Above it was a rust-streaked maintenance hatch, round and thick with reinforcement ribs. It looked more like the inside of a battleship than a stadium utility access. Claire had gone first, climbing carefully, pushing the hatch with her shoulder. It gave way with a sharp metallic pop and a hiss of stagnant air. Sunlight streamed down the shaft in angled rays. For a few seconds, we all stared upward in disbelief, like prisoners seeing the sky for the first time in weeks. But then we heard the sounds behind us, shuffling, feet on wet concrete, low growls and rhythmic breathing echoing unnaturally through the narrow tunnel. Something was following us. Fast. Too fast. "Move!" Imani whispered harshly, shoving Travis toward the ladder. "Now!" I helped the others start climbing one by one. The ladder wasn't built for speed. It was narrow, slippery with condensation, and the rungs creaked under weight. The infected were coming from the direction of the stadium basement, drawn by our scent or the sound, or maybe both. Whatever barrier had held them back down there had finally failed. I looked back only once. Their silhouettes moved through the dark like insects, fast, jerky, their eyes glowing faintly in the beam of Bobby's flickering flashlight. One of them screeched, high-pitched and guttural, and charged the slope toward us, hands scraping the metal walls for purchase. That's when I saw her face in the light. It was Nurse Priya. She'd been a triage nurse 2 days ago. Now, her jaw hung open at an unnatural angle, teeth broken, lips raw and bleeding. Her shirt was soaked in blood. She wasn't running. She was climbing the walls like she didn't even need legs. Claire reached down from above and grabbed my wrist. "Let's go," she yelled, yanking me up the last few feet. I scrambled through the open hatch just as Bobby pulled the heavy steel disc shut behind me. He dropped the latch bar into place, wedging a piece of pipe between the hinges for extra lock. We lay there in the sunlight for a full minute, gasping, ears ringing with the sound of distant pounding from below. They had reached the base of the shaft, but they couldn't follow us up. Not yet. We were somewhere behind Globe Life Field, the baseball stadium across from Atant Stadium, and a lower utility bay used for maintenance and equipment transfer. The place looked like it hadn't been touched in weeks, maybe months. A row of abandoned golf carts stood dead against the far wall, their tires flat, batteries gone. Steel doors lined the hallway beyond, and above us a grated staircase led toward daylight and open air. The sunlight wasn't comforting. It was pale, washed out. The air was hot and humid, but still. No breeze, no birds. Claire was the first to speak. "Where is everyone?" The area should have been swarming with responders. Army tents, FEMA stations, helicopters. But there was nothing. Just wind-blown debris, paper scattered across the floor, and old bloodstains on the concrete. Bobby pointed toward the far stairwell. "Loading dock. If it's clear, we'll be outside the original quarantine perimeter." Travis helped me to my feet. "Let's check it fast." We moved as a group, staying low, flashlights off, ears open. I counted our survivors, 9 of us now. The rest hadn't made it out of the stadium's interior. Some turned, some bled out, some simply vanished. At the top of the stairwell was a wide steel door with a push bar. Bobby pressed it open slowly, just enough to peek through. He turned to us, face grim. Parking lot's empty, like completely empty. No vehicles, no guards, no fences. Everything's gone. "What about the quarantine wall?" I asked. He shook his head. "Torn down, bulldozed maybe, no sign of it." We stepped outside into the thick morning heat. The stadium's massive concrete flank loomed behind us, silent now, its jumbotron dead and glass entrances cracked. What had once been a center of national attention, a last-ditch containment zone broadcast live on every news network, was now just a tomb of steel and silence. Beyond the outer lot, Route 30 lay broken and overgrown, littered with abandoned vehicles and scorched tire tracks. Claire was trembling. "Why would they leave it like this?" Imani answered without looking back. "They didn't leave. They ran. We followed the interstate west on foot, staying in the grass off the shoulder, ducking behind trees and median barriers when we heard anything, wind, engines, even birds. But we didn't hear many birds, not anymore. We passed 4 overturned military transports by noon, burned out, shell casings littering the road, rifles discarded and crushed beneath tires. One of them had a red stenciled plate on the rear, TXNG 712A, a National Guard supply unit. Its interior was coated with dried blood, but no bodies. Claire stopped us near a rest area and pointed at a roadside sign, faded but still readable. Denton, 38 miles. If we can make it there, she said, we might find a relay point. There's a hospital, or was. We all looked at each other. 38 miles on foot, with limited supplies, no weapons, and no confirmation of safety. But it was better than going back. That's when Bobby pulled something from his pack. A laminated sheet. It was a printed evacuation map. Before I left my maintenance post, they handed these out. Internal use only. Shows FEMA's planned green zones and movement corridors. Denton was one of the fallback sites. Travis took the sheet and scanned it. This says the fallback was abandoned 3 days after activation. Then why head there? Claire asked. Because, I said quietly, if it's abandoned, that means it wasn't bombed. There might still be infrastructure, generators, food, even medical gear. Imani added. And if we're lucky, radios. We camped that night inside a dry storm drain beneath a highway overpass. The mosquitoes were worse than the infected. Travis stood guard while Bobby and I took turns boiling water over a small fire made from torn roadside flyers and a piece of plastic seat foam. It barely gave any light, but the heat helped dry our soaked socks. I lay back against the cool concrete and closed my eyes. In the dark, you start remembering faces. People you couldn't save. Maya, Jenner, the old man with the cough on day 1. You start thinking about the moments you hesitated, when you thought you had more time, when you thought someone else would handle it. But no one was coming. That truth had settled over all of us now. There would be no convoy, no medevac, no outside rescue. We were on our own. The next morning, about 10 miles from Denton, we finally saw signs of other survivors. They weren't friendly. A ragged barricade had been built across the northbound lanes. Cars piled at odd angles, reinforced with plywood and razor wire. A red flare burned low in a coffee can. From the tree line came a voice, male, scratchy, with a southern accent. Drop your bags, hands high, turn out your pockets. We froze. 3 men stepped into view from behind a tree line near the median. All were armed. 2 with hunting rifles, 1 with a pump-action shotgun and a sidearm. They weren't military, no uniforms, civilian clothes, homemade armor, and sunburned skin. Travis spoke first. We're just passing through. Everything's through, one of the men said. This is our zone now. That means your gear stays here. I could feel Claire tense next to me. Imani whispered, "Don't reach for anything." But it was Bobby who stepped forward, hands raised. "We've got no weapons, just food and medical. You can take the water, but let us walk." The lead man stared at him, then down at Bobby's ID badge, still clipped to his old stadium lanyard. "You from the arena?" "Yes," Bobby said. "You made it out?" "We did." The man looked to the others, exchanged a glance, then stepped aside. "Then you know. You've seen it. That means you're smart enough not to make trouble. Go, but leave the map." We left it, and we kept walking. Denton was a graveyard. Not a crater, not destroyed, just empty. We arrived at the edge of town late in the afternoon. Strip malls lay hollow and gutted. Power lines drooped like dead vines. The hospital, Medical City Denton, stood with its front windows shattered, red handprints smearing the lobby glass. Someone had spray painted over the entrance in black, "Stay Dead." Below that, in faded red, the words, "Last exit denied." Claire stepped through the broken automatic doors first, her boots crunching over shattered glass. The inside of the emergency reception was eerily still. Chairs lay scattered. Cots had been flipped over. The computer monitors behind the nurse's station had been smashed. Blood had dried in looping arcs on the floor, streaked toward the stairwells and treatment wings. Bobby walked past the desk and pressed a gloved hand to the glass panel of a sealed trauma room. Inside, there were stretchers. 4 of them, all empty. "We check power first," he said. "If we've got juice, we've got comms." Imani was already moving, sweeping the hallway with her small flashlight. "And if we've got comms," she said, "we find out what's left out there." We set up a base of sorts in a secured triage room near the second-floor surgical wing. Claire found a functioning lock on one of the doors, and Travis dragged in a supply cart to block it from the inside just in case. The backup power systems had partially failed, but enough remained to run limited equipment. Emergency lights, some internal cameras, and the ancient Hallicrafter's shortwave receiver that sat beneath a dust-covered tarp in the security office. The radio was the kind built before a solid state. Vacuum tubes and analog dials. It whined and buzzed when it powered on, but we tuned slowly across the band and began picking up voices. Some human, some automatic, some broken. A few in English, most in Spanish, a few in static-ridden French, and one in what sounded like Mandarin. We started writing everything down. The clearest signal was still from Node 9, on 121.5 MHz. "This is Civil Broadcast Node 9. Containment failure confirmed. Primary quarantine corridors lost. Return to safe rural elevation zones. Airspace above zone regions remains hostile and denied. No mention of Globe Life Field. No mention of Dallas, Arlington, or even Fort Worth." The silence told us what we already suspected. It was gone. That night, I took first watch while the others rested. The hospital roof access door was jammed open with a mop handle, and from there I could see most of downtown Denton, dark silhouettes of buildings against the distant flicker of fires towards the south. The sky was hazy, not with clouds, but with smoke. Somewhere down I-35, something was still burning. I thought about the first day of the outbreak. Not when it started, but when I knew, that moment in the triage tent, when I saw the girl bite through a medic's wrist and never stop chewing. That wasn't rage, that wasn't madness, that was hunger, deep and instinctive and relentless. Back then, we still thought the sick could be treated, contained, even cured. We don't think that anymore. The next morning, we cleared the pediatric ward first. It was mostly untouched. The infected must have passed it by during the chaos. Imani suggested it as a fallback shelter if the trauma wing became compromised. It was Claire who found the pharmacy keycard buried under a fallen metal cabinet. Inside the drug vault, most of the narcotics were gone, cleaned out in the early panic, probably by hospital staff. But there were still racks of antibiotics, saline, sutures, sterile gloves, IV lines. Enough to set up a basic clinic. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were building something. Bobby started keeping logs, tracking power availability, battery life, fuel levels from the generator on the roof. He spent 2 days rewiring a damaged panel so we could bring emergency power online in the stairwells and ICU. He did it with tools scavenged from the ambulance bay, running makeshift jumper lines from ceiling junction boxes. He wasn't a licensed electrician, but in this new world, he was our engineer. Amani and Travis took over external sweeps, mapping the local area, checking for open buildings, noting where the infected moved and where they didn't. They found an abandoned National Guard checkpoint 5 blocks west of the hospital. The camp was gutted, tents collapsed, sandbags shredded, but the armory had been overlooked. Inside were 4 working rifles, a case of 5.56 mm rounds, a med kit, and 1 handheld shortwave with a dead battery pack. We rigged it to charge via Bobby's rooftop panel array and started scanning for live signals every 4 hours. We heard nothing, not for days. Then something broke through. It came on a UHF band out of Austin. A woman's voice, panicked, distant. "Repeat, this is Level 4 facility in Austin. Fire suppression failed. Infected breached inner ring. We are evacuating to Site G. If you're hearing this, do not..." The signal cut off, no follow-up, just static, but we marked the time and frequency. Claire leaned over the map on the ICU whiteboard. What's Site G? No one knew. Not at first. But Bobby remembered a conversation he'd overheard before the evacuation at the stadium. A National Guard lieutenant, whispering into a satellite phone. Site Golf confirmed. Assets moving by rail from Central Command. Eastern route compromised. Site G was real, but it wasn't public. We pieced it together from clues. Old FEMA site planning documents, scattered bits of data from the radio logs, even a half-burned shipment invoice found in the hospital admin office. Site G referred to a government fallback location deep in the Wichita Mountains near Lawton, Oklahoma. Military land, closed to civilians for decades. It was the last place they'd go, if they were still alive. We had a choice. Stay in Denton. Fortify. Wait out the collapse and hope that the infected burn themselves out. Or move. It wasn't an easy call. But food was running low. We hadn't seen another survivor in over a week, and the infected were getting smarter. One night, while I was on the second-floor rotation, I saw something that changed everything. An infected, a young man, maybe early 20s, approached the hospital loading dock. He didn't growl, he didn't charge, he just stopped, listened, stared at the security camera mounted near the roofline. Then he picked up a rock and threw it, hit the lens dead on, shattered it. I'd seen them bang, tear, bite, but never target. He wasn't rabid, he was aware. And that meant time was against us. We left Denton 2 days later. Took only what we could carry: water, antibiotics, 3 rifles, and enough ammo to buy us space if we were cornered. Bobby rolled the radio logs and generator schematics into a plastic tube and packed it in a dry bag. I carried the only remaining trauma pack over my shoulder. Claire led us northeast, cutting cross-country to avoid the larger towns. We bypassed Gainesville, crossed into Oklahoma through wooded floodlands under cover of mist. We saw infected only twice. Both times we stayed low. Didn't fire. Didn't breathe. By the 5th day, we reached the edge of the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge. The entrance was barricaded, not with debris or vehicles, but with earth berms, camouflaged netting, and crushed chain link topped with electric fencing. There were signs posted in 3 languages. Federal property restricted access. Authorized personnel only. Alt. Use of deadly force permitted. A motion-triggered speaker activated when we stepped within 30 feet. You are approaching a secure zone. Turn back now. This is your only warning. But Claire didn't stop walking. She stepped forward, hands raised. and the speaker crackled again. A new voice came through, male, calm, tired. "You made it from Denton?" She nodded. "Wait there." We waited. 3 minutes later, the fence groaned open. They didn't welcome us with open arms. No one hugged, no one cried. But they checked us for infection, scanned our vitals, logged our blood types, issued sterilized clothing, gave us electrolyte packs and rehydrated rations, and assigned us temporary bunks in an underground facility built decades ago as part of NORAD fallback infrastructure. The place was called Granite Gate. Population 123. Maybe 124 if you counted the infant born last week. There were no plans to rebuild, no cure, no rescue mission. Just survival and stories. We told them ours. About the stadium. About the people who were left behind. About the medical tents and the screaming that never stopped. And they told us theirs. About the early government collapse. About the order to burn the camps before they were overrun. About how Site A through F had all gone dark. Only G remained. And even here, the clock was ticking. It's been 2 weeks since we arrived. I still wake up thinking I'm in that tent. Still dream of gurneys covered in blood. But there's one thing I hold on to. One thing stronger than any nightmare. We made it. We didn't save everyone, but we saved each other. And if you're out there, if you're still alive, find high ground. Watch the skies, listen for the static, because somewhere, deep inside the noise, there's still a voice, and it says, "You are not alone." I still wake up thinking I'm in that tent. Still dream of gurneys covered in blood. But there's one thing I hold on to. One thing stronger than any nightmare. We made it. We didn't save everyone, but we saved each other. And if you're out there, if you're still alive, find high ground. Watch the skies, listen for the static, because somewhere, deep inside the noise, there's still a voice, and it says, "You are not alone." Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.